See, this is what I'm talking about. I'm weak. How the hell am I weak? You thought I knew or planned that I was gonna be taking care of my brothers and sisters? Huh? What you know? Who you know? You trying to set me up next?
Chicago, Illinois, September 2nd, 2012, just before sunrise. She was shot and stabbed to death in her own bedroom while lying next to her boyfriend. Her name was Yolanda Holmes. She was 45 years old. She was a mother, a business owner, the founder of Nappy Head Salon in uptown Chicago. She gave free cuts to kids on the first day of school, paid bills for clients when they couldn't, created a space where neighbors felt welcome and seen. She raised her only son on her own, bought him a car, designer clothes, gave him steady work, protected him from the streets, and built a life for him she never had. Then she was murdered. Police say it wasn't a stranger. There was no forced entry, no burglary. They say it was her own son, 23-year-old Carmaine Wilson, an aspiring rapper who called himself Young QC. Investigators say he paid a friend to kill her, then made a phone call and told him to go back and finish the job. The motive? Insurance money. Image. Status. This wasn't random. This wasn't survival. This was planned. A woman who gave everything to her son, to her community, was taken out by the very person she sacrificed for. And when it was done, he didn't hide. He withdrew her savings. He threw her cash into crowds. He recorded himself doing it. This is the story of Yolanda Holmes, a mother, a provider, a protector, and how the son she trusted most became the one who signed her death certificate. Welcome to AirAd True Crime Vault. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, subscribe to AirAd True Crime Vault, where we bring you the real stories behind the crimes that leave lasting scars. Yolanda Holmes was Chicago through and through. She grew up here, worked here, and built a name for herself on the city's north side. In uptown, her salon, Nappy Heads, wasn't just a place to get your hair done. It was a community hub. People came in for cuts and styles, but they left feeling valued. She had regulars who had been coming for years, some since they were kids. On the first day of school, she'd line up children in her chairs and give them free haircuts, so they could walk into class feeling confident. When a client fell behind on bills, Yolanda would quietly help, never making a show of it. She worked long days, 6 days a week, and still found time to check in on neighbors and friends. Her work ethic wasn't just about earning. It was about setting an example, especially for her son. Her life revolved around him. He was her only child, the one she protected from the life she'd seen others fall into. She made sure he had a car before most of his friends could drive. She bought him clothes that made him stand out. She gave him a job at the salon, so he'd never have to hustle in the streets. To her, providing wasn't optional. It was the whole point. She believed in giving him every advantage, so he wouldn't have to struggle the way she had. Carmaine Wilson, her son, grew up in a different reality than most kids in the neighborhood. His father, Jeffrey Todd Wilson, had been a high-ranking gang leader, convicted of murder and serving a life sentence since the early 1990s. Yolanda had worked hard to keep her son far from that path, and in many ways she succeeded. Carmaine wasn't out on corners or running with crews, but he wasn't satisfied with quiet success. By his early 20s, Carmaine had started calling himself Young QC. He cultivated a persona that was larger than life. Online, he was all flash, gold chains, expensive watches, designer labels, custom cars. He posted photos and videos showing stacks of cash, acting as though he had already made it big in a rap game. He told followers he believed in giving back, framing himself as someone who looked out for his community. He even created and starred in a small YouTube web series, playing a confident, street-smart character to his online audience. He appeared to be a young man on the rise, but offline, the picture was different. His music wasn't earning him much money. The lifestyle he showed online wasn't funded by a career. It was sustained by what his mother provided. And while Yolanda saw her support as love and sacrifice, Carmaine began to see it as something else entirely, a limitation. The image he projected to the world didn't match the reality of living in his mother's home, driving a car she bought, and relying on the money she made. Those close to Yolanda say she never complained about what she gave him. To her, that was her role as a mother. But to Carmine, it wasn't enough to be taken care of. He wanted the freedom, the cash, and the status to match the image he had built, and he wanted it fast. Chicago, 2012. A city with neighborhoods that could feel like entirely different worlds depending on which block you stood on. Uptown sat on the north side, diverse, busy, and in transition. On one block, decades-old apartment buildings and small storefronts. On the next, new developments and coffee shops moving in. It was a place where working-class families and young professionals crossed paths daily. The streets carried the sound of traffic, the rumble of buses, and music spilling from passing cars. The local rap scene was on a rise, fueled by both street credibility and the growing power of social media. For young artists, a phone camera and an internet connection could create an audience in ways traditional labels never had. Image mattered, sometimes more than the music itself. And in Chicago, those images often came with stories of success, survival, and wealth. It was a time when followers online could make you feel like you'd already made it, even if the reality was different. Yolanda's apartment stood just a short walk from her salon. It wasn't lavish, but it was hers. Inside, the warmth was immediate. Walls with framed photos of family, salon awards, and snapshot of her son over the years. The furniture was clean and well kept, chosen with care, and the kitchen carried the faint smell of the meals she prepared for friends and family. Every piece in that home told a story of work, not given but earned. This was the backdrop of Yolanda's life and Carmine's world. A city that could lift you or swallow you. A neighborhood that demanded resilience. An era when ambition could be broadcast to thousands in seconds, and when the gap between who you were and who you claimed to be could become impossible to ignore. Before we move deeper into the events, tell me in the comments, do you think where someone grows up can shape the crimes they commit, or is it all about personal choices? Your perspective matters here. And if you want more in-depth true crime analysis like this, subscribe to AirAd True Crime Vault so you don't miss future cases. September 1st, 2012, a Saturday night in Chicago. While the city's nightlife carried on, plans were unfolding that had nothing to do with music or parties. That evening, 23-year-old Carmine Wilson met with his longtime friend, Eugene Spencer. It wasn't a casual meetup. Wilson handed Spencer a handgun. He gave him the security code to his mother's apartment building. He told him exactly what to do once he got inside. Waiting outside in a parked car would be Wilson's girlfriend, Loriana Johnson. Her job was simple. Be there when Spencer came out. By the early hours of September 2nd, the streets around North Kenmore Avenue were quiet. Inside her second-floor apartment, Yolanda Holmes was asleep. She wasn't alone. Her boyfriend, Curtis Wyatt, was lying beside her. The bedroom door was closed. There was no reason to expect anyone to come through it. At around 4 a.m., Spencer entered the building using the code Wilson had given him. He made his way to Yolanda's unit, stepped inside, and went straight to the bedroom. Without warning, a gunshot rang out. Yolanda was hit in the head as she lay in bed. Wyatt, startled awake, lunged at the intruder. A fight broke out in the small bedroom. Spencer used a gun like a club, striking Wyatt until he lost consciousness. Spencer left the apartment, heading back toward the getaway car. But before he could drive off, his phone rang. It was Wilson. The instruction was short and clear. Make sure the bitch is dead. Spencer turned around, walked back inside, and went to the bedroom. Yolanda was still in the bed where he'd left her. This time, he used a knife. Multiple stab wounds. The job, as Wilson had framed it, was finished. Minutes later, Curtis Wyatt regained consciousness. He saw the aftermath, Yolanda bleeding unresponsive. He called 911. His voice panicked, trying to explain what had happened. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. At the scene, Yolanda Holmes was pronounced dead. In the hours after Yolanda Holmes was pronounced dead, detectives began piecing together what they could from a chaotic scene. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing obvious was missing. That alone made things difficult. Without a break-in or robbery, the motive wasn't clear. Curtis Wyatt told investigators what he remembered. waking to the sound of a gunshot, struggling with a man he didn't recognize, and then blacking out. His description gave him a starting point, but not a suspect. Weeks passed. Leads came and went. The case wasn't cold, but it wasn't moving forward either. Then, more than a year later, a small detail in Yolanda's phone records caught an investigator's attention. Yolanda had 2 cell lines on her account. One of them, the second line, showed unusual call activity in the hours surrounding her murder. That same number was one Comaine Wilson had given detectives when they first spoke to him after the killing. It was the first tangible thread connecting him to the crime. Detectives pulled the call history. It showed repeated communication between Wilson and Eugene Spencer, before, during, and right after the time Yolanda was killed. It wasn't circumstantial anymore. The timing lined up too precisely to ignore. When police brought Spencer in for questioning, the story came out. He admitted Wilson had offered him $3,500 to carry out the killing. He described getting the building entry code, being given a gun, and being told what to do once inside. He also confirmed the phone call after he left the apartment. The order to go back and make sure Yolanda was dead. For all of that, he said, Wilson paid him just $70. From there, investigators closed the loop. They confirmed Lorianna Johnson's role as the driver that night. The connections were now concrete. Wilson, the planner, Spencer, the shooter, Johnson, the getaway. In December of 2013, all 3 were arrested. The charges included first-degree murder, home invasion, and armed robbery. The case was finally moving toward court, and the story that would come out, there was one even seasoned prosecutors wouldn't forget. When investigators began piecing together the why, the answer wasn't buried in years of conflict or a sudden argument. It was calculated. Prosecutors described it as pure greed, the need for quick cash to keep up the image Wilson had built for himself online. His music career hadn't taken off, but the persona he projected was expensive to maintain. Designer clothes, custom cars, jewelry, nights out, all of it had a cost, and most of it was being covered by his mother. Wilson presented himself to his followers as someone who had already made it. The gold chains, the stacks of money in hand, the confident talk about giving back. But behind that image was a man still living under his mother's roof, still driving the car she bought him, still funded by the woman he now saw as standing in his way. In his mind, control over that money meant control over the life he wanted people to believe he had. That's where the betrayal cuts the deepest. Yolanda wasn't just his mother. She was his foundation. She gave him what many people in their community never had: stability, opportunity, protection. To her, that was love. To him, it became leverage. Prosecutors say he stopped seeing her as a parent and started seeing her as an obstacle between him and the image he wanted to live full-time. The gap between public image and private reality was wide. Online, he was young QC, the rapper with money to give away, the man in control. Offline, his bank account told another story, one tied directly to Yolanda's hard work and savings. In the end, the decision to have her killed wasn't about survival. It wasn't about fear. It was about wanting more than what he already had and wanting it now. Cases like this force us to ask, what truly drives someone to kill a parent? Is it something broken inside them, or a slow build of entitlement over years? Share your thoughts below. And if you value real, well-researched true crime stories told without sensationalism, subscribe to AirAd True Crime Vault and be part of this community. When the case finally went to trial in 2019, the courtroom was filled with family, reporters, and people from the neighborhood who had known Yolanda. The prosecution laid out the events step by step, but it was the videos that drew the strongest reaction. On the screen, the jury watched footage of Wilson walking into a bank, withdrawing $20,000 in cash, and then tossing it into a crowd while cameras rolled. They argued this wasn't generosity. It was performance, funded by the murder of his mother. To them, it showed character, motive, and a complete lack of remorse. The defense pushed back, calling the videos prejudicial. They claimed this was showmanship, unrelated to the killing, and that Wilson never intended for his mother to die. But the phone records, the confession from Spencer, and the sequence of events told another story. One the prosecution said was too deliberate to ignore. After hearing all the evidence, the jury didn't need much time. Less than 2 hours of deliberation, and the verdict came back. Guilty on all counts for Wilson and Spencer. First-degree murder. Attempted murder for the attack on Curtis Wyatt. Home invasion. The room was silent, except for the clerk reading each decision. At sentencing, Judge Stanley Sachs addressed Wilson directly. His words cut through the courtroom. She gave Comaine life, and it was his choice to take it away from her. The weight of that statement hung in the air. Wilson received 99 years in prison. Eugene Spencer was sentenced to 100 years. Lorianna Johnson, who had driven the getaway car, was sentenced to 14 years. Outside the courthouse, the public reaction was one of disbelief and anger. For many, it wasn't just the brutality of the crime. It was who it was done to and who had done it. A mother who had built her life around her son, and a son who had planned her death. The case left a mark on the city, not just because of crime itself, but because it tore at something people believed to be unbreakable. The bond between parent and child. In the years since the trial, Yolanda's family has carried a question that no verdict could answer. Why? They've heard the prosecution's version, the talk of greed and image. But for those who loved her, it doesn't explain how a son could choose to end the life of the mother who raised him. Her sister has said it plainly. We still don't know why he did it. That lack of clarity makes the loss even heavier. In Uptown, people still talk about Yolanda in the present tense, as if speaking of her in the past feels wrong. They remember her as hardworking, someone who built what she had from nothing, and as loving, always making time for those around her no matter how full her days were. Customers from Nappy Head still recall how she'd remember every detail about their lives, how she made her shop feel like a safe space. For many, the shock wasn't only in the crime. It was in losing someone who was part of the neighborhood's fabric. Wilson remains in prison, serving his 99-year sentence. His appeals have gone nowhere. Spencer is also still behind bars, facing his own century-long term. Lorianna Johnson served part of her sentence before release, her role in the night still remembered by those who followed the case. The story of Yolanda Holmes has not faded from public memory. It's been covered in documentaries, news specials, and true crime programs, each retelling serving as a warning. For some, it's a lesson about greed. For others, about the danger of ignoring the gap between image and reality. In the true crime community, it stands as a case that strips away comfort. A reminder that sometimes the person you protect most is the one who takes everything from you. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the person you'd never think to fear, the one you spent your life protecting. Yolanda Holmes built her life around her son. She worked, she sacrificed, she gave without asking for anything back. And when she had nothing left to give, he decided it wasn't enough. The cost wasn't just her life. It was the future she would continue to build for herself, for her family, for her community. The image on the screen is still now. Yolanda in her salon, smiling as she stands with scissors in hand, ready for the next customer. It's the version of her people want to remember. The business owner. The mother. The woman who made time for everyone. That's what was taken away. Stories like this aren't easy to hear, but they matter. What does justice look like to you in a case like this? Is 99 years enough? Let's talk in the comments. And if you want to stay informed with carefully researched, fact-driven true crime coverage, subscribe to ARAD True Crime Vault and join a community that values truth over hype.